I've been thinking about why children believe in magic and adults don't.
Not in some abstract way, but really thinking about it.
Because somewhere between age 7 and 17, most of us lose something. We call it growing up. We say we're being realistic. But what if what we're really doing is forgetting how to see?
This is the final part of a trilogy called The Basilisk by Sergey Drugal, a Russian writer who spent decades working in nature conservation. The full title of this section is Vitally Necessary, which sounds bureaucratic until you realize he means it literally.
Some things are necessary for life itself. Not convenient. Not useful. Necessary.
The story takes place in a future where humanity nearly destroyed the natural world, then tried to rebuild it. They created institutes of nature restoration.
They're cloning extinct animals. They're rewilding huge territories, trying to bring back what was lost.
It's science fiction, but the kind that feels like it could be tomorrow's news.
And running through it is this strange question that kept me awake after I finished reading. What happens when you restore nature so completely that the old rules stop applying? There's a character named Alyashka. He's a kid, but not a normal kid. He's what they call an accelerate, someone whose mind developed faster than usual. Smart enough to understand complex ideas, but young enough to still remember how children think. At one point he's talking to adults about why animals in fairy tales can speak. And he says something that sounds simple but isn't. He says, in the beginning, everyone was brothers. People and animals, all understood each other. Then people started behaving badly. The animals got offended and left for the forests, deserts, and tundra. It's the kind of explanation a child would give. Innocent. But then Alyashka keeps going. He explains why some animals stayed with humans. Dogs stayed out of kindness. Cats stayed out of laziness. Cows and other grazing animals stayed because they're weak-willed. When I read this, I laughed. Then I stopped laughing because I realized he's describing a theory of domestication through the lens of character judgment. It's absurd. It's also kind of brilliant. Because maybe the animals that stayed with us really did have something different in their nature. We call it tameness. A child calls it weak character. Both words are trying to describe the same mystery, why some creatures chose to live alongside humans despite everything we've done. But here's where it gets strange. Alyashka, this kid who can explain things like a philosopher, admits he's lost something. He's talking to a bio-android named Nuri about his little sister. He says, she can bring her doll to life through the force of imagination, and she doesn't even have to try. I used to be able to do that too, but now I can't. I don't know about you, but I experience this as a loss. Read that again. A child who's smarter than most adults, who can discuss ecology and philosophy, says he's lost something. He used to be able to make his toys come alive in his mind. Now he can't. And he knows it's a loss. I work with people every day. I talk to factory workers, nurses, drivers, people with practical jobs who deal with real things. And I've heard this same feeling expressed in different words. Someone will say, I used to draw when I was young. Or, I used to make up stories. Or, I used to spend hours just watching clouds. Then life happened. Bills. Responsibilities. The practical world. And that thing they used to do, that way of seeing, it just faded. They don't even remember the exact moment it left. Drugal is asking, what is that thing we lose? And can we get it back? Nuri, the bio-android, asks Alyashka a question, but up to what limit? That's the question. He's asking how far a child's imagination can go in bringing things to life. Can they animate a doll? A stick? A rock? Where's the boundary? Alyashka answers, I think there are no limits. Because there are no limits to imagination and fantasy. This conversation happens early in the section, and I marked the page because I wanted to come back to it. At the time, I thought it was just philosophical talk. Two characters discussing the nature of childhood imagination. But Drugal is setting something up. He's preparing you for what comes later, when the question stops being philosophical and becomes literal. Because in this restored wilderness they're creating, something is happening. The forest is getting too wild. Not just wild in the sense of untamed. Wild in the old sense. Primordial. The Russian word is dremachist, which doesn't translate cleanly. It means ancient forest darkness. The kind of deep woods where wolves talk and witches live in huts on chicken legs. Fairy tale wilderness. And in this wilderness, things are appearing. Not just regular animals. Mythological creatures. A Tyanatokia, a creature that's two animals joined together, one head facing forward, one backward. In English we'd call it a Pushmipuliu, from Dr. Dolittle. Except in this story, it's not from a children's book. It's lying on an examination table in a scientific institute, real, breathing, impossible. The scientists are trying to explain it. One of them says, if in a sufficiently large region genuine primordial wilderness arises, it inevitably generates fairy tale. And from the other side, the boundary between fairy tale and reality becomes blurred. Let me say that in simpler words. He's claiming that if you make a forest wild enough, old enough, deep enough, it starts producing the creatures from old stories. Not because someone bioengineered them. Not because of mutation or genetic accidents. But because the wilderness itself, when it reaches a certain depth, stops following modern rules and starts following older ones. This sounds like fantasy. It sounds crazy. But Drugal isn't writing fantasy. He's writing science fiction. And there's a difference. Fantasy says magic exists, accept it. Science fiction says, what if this was real? What would that mean? What are the implications? Another scientist disagrees. He's the practical type. But then he catches himself and says something that made me stop and reread the page 3 times. I used to agree, primordial ways were backward forces. But development, it goes in spirals. Turns out that primordialness has become a progressive force again, but at a different level. This is about more than forests. He's describing how history moves. We think progress is a straight line. We move from primitive to advanced, from superstition to science, from darkness to light. One direction. Always forward. But what if it's not a line? What if it's a spiral? You come back around to something that looks like where you started, but you're at a different height. The primitiveness returns, but it means something new. I've seen this in my own work. In my own life. You learn complexity. You study systems, theories, frameworks. Everything gets more sophisticated. Then one day you realize the simple approach you abandoned years ago was actually right, but you had to go through all the complexity to understand why it was right. You return to the beginning, but you're different now. That's what's happening in this book. Humanity built a technological civilization. They mastered nature. Then they nearly destroyed everything. Now they're trying to restore it. And in restoring it completely, they're bringing back not just the animals and plants, but something older. Something they thought was metaphor and symbol. The stories themselves are coming back. Made flesh. Real. Here's what happens in this section. The book brings us back to a character named Gigantiac, who was fired earlier in the story for being incompetent. Now, most people when they get fired for incompetence, they go find something else to do, maybe something that fits their abilities better. Not Gigantiac. He decides to start a movement. He gathers a group he calls enthusiasts and begins preaching about how all this complicated science, genetics, cybernetics, all those big words, it's all unnecessary. Maybe even fake. He's got this speech he gives. The book quotes him saying, all that genetics, cybernetics, whatever. Aren't they false sciences? Don't cloud my brain with science, just give me the product. Kondivost, I tell you, is strength. You have to understand it with your gut. That word, kondivost, it's hard to translate directly. It means something like roughness, simplicity, getting back to basics. The old-fashioned way. Like when someone says forget all those fancy techniques, just do it the way your grandfather did. There's an appeal to it, right? When life gets complicated, when you're drowning in procedures and technical manuals and expert opinions that contradict each other, someone comes along and says, forget all that, trust your instincts, keep it simple. I've seen this happen in real workplaces. Someone proposes a new system, something that requires training, learning new software, changing how things are done. And there's always someone who says, we don't need all this modern nonsense, the old way worked fine. Sometimes they're right, sometimes new systems are just complexity for complexity's sake. But sometimes the old way worked fine when you had 10 customers, and now you have 10,000, and your gut feeling isn't enough anymore. Drugal is writing satire here, very sharp satire. Because what Gigantea creates isn't actually a return to simplicity. It's a performance of simplicity. The book describes how he organized an exhibition of achievements for when the inspectors came. The exhibits were locked in what the book calls agitation sarcophagi, these upright iron boxes, and they just sat there collecting dust in dark corridors until the next inspection. Nobody was doing real work. They were creating the appearance of work. This is something you see everywhere once you start looking for it. The meeting that could have been an email. The report nobody reads but everyone has to write. The safety training video you click through while doing something else, just to get the certificate. It's not about the thing, it's about being seen to do the thing. And Gigantea takes this further. He hires 5 deputies. 5. The book points out that Satan, the actual director of the whole facility, only had 3 deputies. This is very prestigious, it says, because Satan himself had only 3. Think about that. The measure of success isn't what you accomplish. It's how many people report to you. How big your empire looks on the org chart. I once worked in a place where a department head fought for months to get approval for 2 additional positions. Not because the work required it, we all knew the work could be done with the current team if we just organized better. But because the department down the hall had more people, and therefore more budget, and therefore more respect in meetings. It was pure status competition dressed up in the language of operational necessity. But here's where it gets really interesting. Gigantea's movement rejects genetics as false science, as unnecessary complication. They're going back to nature, to Kondovost, to the simple traditional ways. And then they breed a bird. They were trying to recreate the fairy tale chicken Ryaba from Russian folklore. They forgot about the chicken, but they ended up with something called a roo bird, this massive creature with enormous drumsticks. The book Drilly notes, apparently, genetics was still involved somehow. Though the developers again insisted on Kondovost. This is perfect. You can't actually escape complexity by declaring it doesn't exist. Reality doesn't care about your philosophy. If you breed animals to be bigger, you're doing genetics whether you call it that or not. The anti-science movement ends up using science while pretending they're not. They just don't understand the science they're using, which makes it more dangerous, not less. Meanwhile, in another part of this world, real education is happening. Children are learning ecology not from textbooks but from direct contact with animals. They feed the creatures, including ones brought from Mars. The book says, the Ecology Council gave this no less importance than the actual restoration of nature itself. That's a real educational philosophy buried in this science fiction story. You don't learn about nature by reading about it. You learn by touching it, feeding it, being responsible for it. I think about that whenever I see those nature documentaries shot with drones and telephoto lenses, showing you animals in stunning 8K resolution. Beautiful, educational, important. But it's not the same as standing near a horse and learning it has preferences and moods. It's not the same as feeding chickens and discovering they have a pecking order and personalities. The documentary gives you information. The direct contact gives you relationship. There's a moment in this section that stuck with me. It's about Gigantea's sunglasses. He wears mirrored sunglasses, never takes them off. The book says, in Gigantea's glasses the clear sky was reflected, but for some reason no one dared look under the glasses. Those mirrored surfaces, they create a barrier. You can't see his eyes, can't read his expression, can't make contact. And people are afraid to ask him to remove them. It's a tiny detail, but it's a perfect image of power. The boss who's always behind the desk, the executive who only appears on video calls with the camera angle just so, the manager who communicates only through intermediaries. Real authority doesn't need those barriers. But the performance of authority does. When you're not sure you deserve respect, you create distance. The mirrors say, "I'm watching you, but you can't watch me. I can see you, but you can't see if I'm really paying attention or just bored." It's a one-way relationship. Then the story shifts to something completely different. There's a problem: someone found a golden egg among 10,000 chickens, and now they need to figure out which chicken laid it. The adults are stumped. They're running tests, developing procedures, analyzing data. And then a kid shows up. The book calls him the local child prodigy. He pulls his finger out of his nose and says, "I'm amazed at you. Isn't it obvious? It was laid by chicken Ryaba." He's applying fairy tale logic. In the Russian folktale, Ryaba is the chicken who lays a golden egg. The adults have forgotten the story. They're so deep in their analytical thinking that they can't see the simple pattern right in front of them. The child still lives in a world where stories and reality connect. He hasn't learned yet that you're supposed to keep them separate. This is the thread that runs through this whole section. There's a kind of knowledge that requires you to still believe in things. Not believe stupidly, the way Gigantiac's anti-science movement does. But believe openly, the way children do, where magic might be real because you haven't decided yet that it can't be. The moment that stays with me from this section is when Nuri, exhausted and magically terrified, does something absurdly simple. He reaches out and pats the dragon on its wet nostril. Just slaps it gently, like you'd pat a nervous horse. And in that physical gesture, something breaks. He wipes his forehead and thinks to himself that he's just tired of being afraid. That's it. That's the whole technique. He doesn't meditate, doesn't give himself a pep talk, doesn't try to logically analyze why the fear is irrational. He just performs a physical action that contradicts the fear, and the spell shatters. I've thought about this moment a lot because it maps onto something I've experienced in regular life. Not with dragons obviously, but with fear that feels bigger than it should be. The kind where you know rationally there's no real danger, but your body doesn't care what you know. Sometimes the only way through is to move your hands, to do the thing you're avoiding, to physically interrupt the loop your nervous system is running. Drugal writes it like this. Nuri is fighting nausea, he pats the dragon on the nose, and thinks, well, what are you staring at? He wipes his forehead, feeling that he's already tired of being afraid. Then he starts thinking clearly and realizes the absurdity of the whole situation. He was afraid of something unknown back at the meadow with the unicorn, got scared of herbivorous livestock here, in a place where according to fairy tale logic, fears shouldn't frighten you. Look at those teeth, he thinks. Flat. This is a grass eater. The fear was real. The magic making him afraid was real. But the danger wasn't. And recognizing that gap, that space between what you feel and what's actually threatening you, that's the beginning of freedom. Then he drinks the dragon's milk. And here Drugal does something interesting. He doesn't make it taste terrible like medicine usually does in stories where it's good for you. The milk tastes of honey and linden flowers. It's described as wonderful. And as Nuri drinks it, fear departs as if bright fire ran through his veins. He drains a second ladle and laughs. This feels important to me. Healing doesn't have to hurt. Sometimes the thing that makes you better is also sweet. Sometimes medicine and pleasure aren't opposites. The dragon's milk is both magical and nourishing, both supernatural and natural, and there's no contradiction there. After this, Nuri meets Ivanushka the fool, who's working with a cauldron full of what he calls primordial soup. This is where Drugal really starts playing with the boundary between magic and science. The primordial soup is a reference to the scientific theory of how life began on Earth, the chemical mixture from which the first organisms emerged. But in this fairy tale world, it's literal. Ivanushka has an actual cauldron of the stuff, and he's using it to create living creatures. Nobody knows exactly what's in it.
Ivanushka says its composition is unknown, but as it's written in primers, everything came from it. They're working by trial and error, what he calls creeping empiricism and the complete absence of theory. Then he uses a phrase that made me laugh, the method of scientific poking. If you've ever worked on something complicated without a manual, you know this method. You try something. You see what happens. You adjust. You try again. It's not elegant. It's not what they teach in schools. But it's how most actual work gets done when you're dealing with something genuinely new. Ivanushka brings up something that stopped me cold when I first read it. He says what captivates him most about epistemology, the philosophy of knowledge, is the idea of infinite cognition. This is comforting, he says. Not to know everything. Think about that for a second. In a world that constantly tells you that you need more information, more data, more expertise before you can act, here's someone saying the opposite. The fact that knowledge is infinite, that you'll never reach the end of it, that's not depressing. That's liberation. You don't have to know everything. You can't know everything. So you might as well start working with what you have. Then he makes a comparison that hits at the heart of human arrogance. Nature spent millions of years creating, he says, and we destroyed it in a century, and now we want to restore it in a decade. He's talking about genetic restoration work, about trying to bring back extinct species. The formal scientists think they can do it with enough funding and research. Ivanushka and his friends are doing it with magic they don't fully understand, and he thinks their humility might actually be an advantage. It's easier for us, he says, because we don't know what we're doing. Therefore we are simple people. There's a deep irony here. The people who admit they're working in the dark, who acknowledge the limits of their understanding, might actually be more realistic than the ones who believe they've got it all figured out. This conversation leads to something more personal. Ivanushka asks Nuri why he left cybernetics to become a teacher. Cybernetics is the kingdom of formal logic, deterministic systems, predictable outcomes. Education is chaos. Every student is different. You can use the same method with 10 kids and get 10 different results. If the method isn't formalized, Ivanushka says, then predicting the outcome is a matter of statistics, and in biology, as in education, there are fluctuations capable of distorting any statistics. You can't predict what will happen when you teach someone something. You can't know in advance which lesson will change a life and which will be forgotten by tomorrow. There are too many variables. The student's mood that day, what they ate for breakfast, what's happening at home, how they slept, whether they trust you, whether the example you chose resonates with something in their particular experience. Education isn't engineering. It's more like gardening. You create conditions and hope. After drinking the dragon's milk, Nuri feels it working through his body. A cow ran through his veins, and he felt its running. His muscles asked for work, and thoughts arose clear and kind. This is one of those passages that sounds simple but carries weight. The physical and mental aren't separate. When your body feels strong, your thoughts clarify. When you're nourished properly, kindness becomes easier. It's not mystical exactly, though it's described magically. It's just true. Later, Nuri meets Master Gazin, a toy maker, and here the book shifts into exploring what it means to make something with your hands. Gazin explains his philosophy. In every gnarled branch, in any block of wood, there's a unique image already contained. You don't impose your vision on the material. You discover what's already there and release it. You have to guess which one, he says, and liberate it. Guess it, feel it, that's the main thing. This isn't just about woodworking. It's about any creative work, any teaching, any relationship. You can't force someone to become your image of what they should be. You have to see what's already there, what wants to emerge, and help that happen. The skill isn't in imposing. It's in perceiving. Each toy Gazin makes is unique. It can't be mass-produced. When he worries about this, that his toys can't reach many children, Nuri tells him, when it comes to beauty, it's sometimes enough just to know that it exists somewhere. Not everything valuable has to scale. Not everything meaningful has to reach millions.
sometimes a single perfect thing, known to exist, is enough. There's a moment in the story where Nuri stands in front of a locked door and Ivanushka explains how his older colleague Romualdzik works. And what Ivanushka says next hits like cold water: these programs are for real forms, but you have fairy tale creatures. And it's all the same. You have to feel this with your gut. Nuri can't understand it. How do you use genetic programs designed for actual animals that exist in nature to create dragons and unicorns that never existed? Where's the logic? Where's the scientific foundation? And Ivanushka just shrugs like it's the most obvious thing in the world. You feel it. You sense it. That's how it works. I think about this whenever someone asks me how I choose which books to read, which ideas to share. There's no algorithm. There's no systematic approach. After you've read enough, touched enough pages, sat with enough stories, something in you starts to recognize patterns that you can't explain to someone else. You just know. And maybe that's what all real craft comes down to eventually. The technique gets you to the door, but something else has to open it. Romualdzik tries to explain it to Nuri another way. He says, imagine you're watching a real animal, a warthog maybe, in its enclosure. You look at it and you think, we live on the same planet, this creature and me. We breathe the same air. We're both real. But then Romualdzik asks, and what if you're petting something that doesn't exist from nose to middle with both hands? I'll tell you. It's even better for you, because it's from a fairy tale. That line stopped me. It's even better because it's from a fairy tale. Not in spite of being fantasy, but because of it. There's something about contact with the impossible that hits different than contact with the merely real. And maybe that's what all art is trying to do. Not reproduce reality, but give you something that reality alone can't provide. But then Nuri has another thought, and this one's more cynical. Maybe these forest workers have it easy. Maybe their success isn't about skill at all. Because who knows what a dragon actually looked like? Nobody. So you produce something scaly, something with wings and membranes, and you say here's your dragon, and who's going to prove you wrong? Who's going to argue? There's no original to compare it to. No fossil record. No photographs. You can't fail at reproducing something that never existed in the first place. It's a fair point. But it also misses something. Because even if nobody can prove your dragon is wrong, everybody can feel when it's not right. We all carry these images in our heads from stories we heard as children, from pictures and books, from some deep place that has opinions about what magic should look like. And you can't fool that part of people. They'll know. Maybe not why they know, but they'll know. Then the book does something I love. It crashes the mythological into the mundane in the most absurd way possible. Nuri meets Ivanushka's neighbor, another forest worker, and this guy has a problem. He's got a dragoness. Beautiful creature, magical, everything you'd hope for. Except she produces milk. A lot of milk. Wild lactation, the neighbor complains. The baby dragons can't suck fast enough. I have to milk her almost 6 times a day. All by hand. All me. And if there's even a slight delay, she starts approaching passers-by. I had to stop reading because I was laughing. This is what happens when you make fairy tales real. You don't just get the magic and wonder. You get a lactating dragon that needs to be milked 6 times a day or she becomes a public nuisance. You get the practical problems. The logistics. The sheer physical labor of maintaining mythology. And Nuri, being practical, suggests the obvious solution. Use a milking machine. Like you would for a cow. The neighbor looks at him like he just suggested using a chainsaw for brain surgery. A dragon is, and you approach it with a device like it's a dairy cow? You need to think, not just apply whatever. This is the collision point. Technology versus nature of the mythical. Science versus soul. You can't just apply mechanical solutions to magical problems. Not because the technology won't work in a practical sense, but because you'd be violating something essential about what the creature is. A dragon isn't a cow that happens to breathe fire. It's something categorically different, and it demands to be treated as such. But the milk itself, when they analyze it, is perfectly describable in scientific terms. 20% fat content, like cream. 15% fructose. Temperature 340 degrees Kelvin. The neighbor rattles off these numbers like he's discussing any agricultural product. Don't worry about the temperature, he adds, it's normal for dragons. The magic has chemistry. The fairy tale has physics. They just require different tools than the ones we're used to. Then Nuri finally gets to see the unicorns. And Drugal writes, struck by this divine beauty, Nuri struggled to catch his breath. Not metaphorically. Actually physically struggled to breathe. Perfect beauty does that. It's not comfortable. It's not gentle. It hits you like a punch and you have to remember how your lungs work. Ivanushka tries to talk about the unicorns but can't. All he manages is, fairy tale of fairy tales, the unicorn. And then nothing else coherent comes out. There's a hierarchy even among impossible creatures. Unicorns sit at the top. Some things are too perfect to describe. Your words fail. Your categories collapse. All you can do is stand there and try to remember how breathing works. But creation at this level comes with risk. Ivanushka explains it carefully. You want to make something good. You follow the recipes, you do the work, you pour in your best intentions. And sometimes what comes out is a basilisk. Pure evil. Death in scales. You want to do good, but what if a basilisk emerges? That's not just about mythical creatures. That's about every act of creation. Every project you start with good intentions. Every relationship you enter trying to love someone well. Every political movement that begins with justice in mind. You can't guarantee the outcome. The recipe might be right, the intention's pure, and still something goes wrong at a level you can't predict or control. Ramualdzik explains why. Creating life requires three things. First, the genome, the genetic information. Second, the recipe, the procedure. But third, and this is the part that matters most, the psychological component of the creator, because the spiritual quality of the product depends on it. Your own inner state becomes part of what you're making. Your doubts, your character, your spiritual condition, they all go into the work. Technology alone is never enough. The soul of the maker enters the thing being made. This is why two people can follow the same instructions and produce completely different results. Why two cooks using identical recipes make food that tastes different. Why two writers using the same plot structure write completely different stories. The maker is in the made. You can't extract yourself from your creations. For better or worse, they carry you inside them. And then the whole experiment collapses in the most terrible way possible. They tried to program goodness into the basilisk. They had these special helmets, technological devices meant to project thoughts and emotions through psychic fields. Every scientist took turns wearing the helmet, trying to transmit positive intentions to the developing creature. The book describes it like this. They wanted to give it gentle character traits, good intentions, to shame evil and glorify good. Think about that for a moment. They're trying to raise a creature through remote psychic influence. Like parenting by radio broadcast. And for a while they thought it was working. But then Pan Perunovich puts on the helmet one day and something goes wrong. The connection establishes. He can feel it. But it's backwards. Instead of him sending goodness to the basilisk is sending something back to him. He says, I became frightening to myself. He suddenly found himself thinking thoughts that weren't his. Dark thoughts. Cruel thoughts. The Firebird chick was sick, dying. They didn't know what was wrong with it. Turns out baby firebirds don't eat grain like adult ones do, they need to eat pearls. Small river pearls. Nobody knew this because it wasn't in any of the ancient texts. They were learning by trial and error, and the chick was dying because they fed it the wrong thing. And while Pan Perunovich was worried about this, wearing the helmet, trying to reach the basilisk, this thought came into his head: let the chick die, to hell with it, would be less hassle anyway, everyone's got blisters on their hands from the burns. He was horrified. That wasn't him thinking. That wasn't how he felt about the Firebird. But the thought was there, inside his mind, and it felt like his voice. This is what the basilisk transmitted. Not violence, not rage. Something more subtle. A kind of cynical indifference to suffering. The thought that other beings' pain is just inconvenient for you. Then other things started happening. Leshy began having hostile thoughts about Pan Perunovich. Pan Perunovich started resenting Leshy. They'd been friends for years, colleagues building something beautiful together, and suddenly they couldn't stand each other. The book says, I hear unleshy thoughts from Leshy about me. Thoughts that weren't in character. Thoughts that felt foreign. And approaching the basilisk's chamber became physically difficult. Not because of any barrier. Because of what the book calls a field of malice. Evil had a presence. It affected the space around it. They realized what had happened. Their experiment didn't fail because the technology was bad. It worked perfectly. The psychic helmets created exactly the connection they intended. But evil is stronger than goodness when you try to transmit it through technology. Or maybe evil is just more contagious. The basilisk didn't receive their good intentions. Instead, they received its nature. And that nature spread to them, turning them against themselves, against each other. The book asks, we thought and couldn't understand how it happened that we inspired goodness in this serpent, but evil grew instead. I think about this a lot. In my work, in organizations I've seen. You can have the best intentions, the purest goals, the most sophisticated methods. But if you're trying to change something without understanding its nature, you might just amplify what's already there. You might think you're broadcasting goodness while actually receiving poison. And once they realized what they'd done, they faced an impossible question. What do you do with evil you've created? The obvious answer is destroy it. Kill the basilisk. But the book asks, who will decide to do that? They couldn't. It was their creation. They tried to make something good. How do you kill your own failure? So they gave up. They stopped their work entirely. They gave the basilisk to someone else to deal with. The book says they did this because they lost faith in their own ability to create good. They no longer trusted themselves. After trying to build something beautiful and accidentally amplifying evil instead, how could they trust their own judgment about anything? This destroyed the whole community. A melancholy feeling of guilt hung over the settlement. These people had been living in an enchanted forest, raising unicorns and firebirds, building something close to paradise. And now every morning they woke up knowing they'd created something evil and couldn't undo it. Guilt like that doesn't just affect individuals. It spreads. It changes how people look at each other. Their life, their idyllic flow, was broken in an instant. And the basilisk itself. It has this fragmentary memory. The book describes it: the serpent dimly remembered something bright and warm. Before the scientists tried to re-educate it, before they put their helmets on and attempted to program it with goodness, it had normal baby animal feelings. Warm feelings. But then, the warmth suddenly disappeared, and it awakened in indifference and coldness and became evil. They broke something in it trying to fix it. And then it escapes. Gets out into the real world. Starts killing. Not for food, animals it kills aren't eaten. Just destruction for its own sake. The basilisk caused this disaster casually, just because. It poisons an entire ecosystem. Kills rare creatures. Spreads evil like contamination. And the scientists who created it have to face this question? Who can admit that because of him, created evil increased in the world? Who takes that sin on their soul? This is the weight they carry. Not just that they failed. That they actively made the world worse while trying to make it better. The only thing that can stand against the basilisk is the unicorn.
And here's why: when the unicorn was still a baby, Leshy personally bathed it in water taken from 9 rivers.
A purification ritual. Not technology. Not programming. Ritual.
The unicorn, it withstood the basilisk's poison because it had been blessed with innocence. There's this moment near the end where they face each other. The book describes it. Before us was the evil we created, purple, black basilisk. And before us was the created miracle, unicorns in battle poses, pink in the pre-sunset rays.
Evil they manufactured. Good that grew naturally. Facing each other in the fading light.
The unicorn dies.
Gets turned to stone before it can complete its mission. Doesn't just tell you this happened, he gives you the mechanism. The basilisk's poison replaces carbon with silicon in living tissue.
Your muscles, your bones, they stop being organic matter and become mineral. You're alive and then you're a statue, and there's a moment in between where you can feel it happening.
The book says it like this.
You grow numb from a strange pain, feeling how your muscles and bones turn to stone. A complete replacement of carbon with silicon occurred in the tissues.
The unicorn didn't finish petrifying. Died mid-transformation.
Became a permanent monument to what happens when purity meets poison.
I remember the first time I saw someone's work destroyed by something they couldn't control. A guy I knew spent 3 years building a small business. Did everything right?
Then a supplier lied, a partner got greedy, and within 6 months the whole thing collapsed.
He didn't do anything wrong.
He just ran into something toxic at the wrong time, and by the time he understood what was happening, the damage was already deep in the structure.
The creators managed to save the basilisk itself, though. They used dragon's milk, which acts as a universal antidote.
The book explains it works on 2 levels at once. Dragon's milk worked as a panacea, neutralizing not only the swamp poison that corroded wounds, but also the creature's own poison.
That detail stuck with me. A cure that handles both the external damage and the internal toxicity. Because the basilisk is both victim and perpetrator. It's been wounded by swamp poison, but it also generates its own petrifying venom. You can't treat one without treating the other.
But here's what kills the community, not the monster itself, but what happens after.
Every creator starts wondering if they were the one who somehow introduced the evil. The collective self-doubt paralyzes them completely. Writes. Now each creator imagines that he himself is the source of evil. Each seemed to try to show that he had no doubt in others' innocence. You see what's happening there? They're all reassuring each other. Loudly proclaiming they trust everyone else. But the reassurance itself proves the doubt. If you really trusted your colleagues, you wouldn't need to keep announcing it. The whole community becomes a performance of trust masking total suspicion. I've watched teams fall apart like this. Something goes wrong, nobody knows exactly why, and instead of figuring it out together, everyone starts protecting themselves. Sending emails to document that they weren't responsible. Being very careful about what they say in meetings. The work continues, but the foundation is gone. Meanwhile, there's a seminar happening about a different kind of problem. They're analyzing the story of Kashai, who cut down a sacred grove. Leshy, the forest spirit, argues with Ivanushka about how to measure evil. Ivanushka keeps trying to quantify Kashai's misdeeds, cut down a grove, insulted a master, replaced good work with empty talk. They seem like small things. But Leshy says, evil, it is dimensionless. That stopped me the first time I read it. We want to measure things. We want to say this is a small wrong, this is a large wrong. We do math. But Leshy is saying evil doesn't work that way. The nature of the act matters more than its scale. You can't do a small amount of betrayal, a minor cruelty, a little bit of destroying what's sacred, and have it count for less. The dimensionless quality of evil means it can't be balanced out by arithmetic. During this seminar, they classify evil into 2 types. Pan Perunovich explains. 2 types of evil exist in nature. The first is primordial evil. Envy, greed, deceit, opportunism, cowardice. That's the stuff that seems to come built into some people. Not everyone, but some. You've met them. The person who can't see someone else succeed without resenting it. The one who'll lie when the truth would work just as well. The coward who'll throw anyone under the bus to save themselves. But then there's the second type. And the second is created evil, created by us. Its cause is our inability or unwillingness to foresee the results of our actions. That's what happened with the basilisk. Not primordial evil. Created evil. They made something without fully thinking through what it would do. They were so focused on whether they could that they didn't properly ask whether they should. And that connects to something Nuri thought earlier about the hardest part of being a creator. This is the hardest part of the creator's work. The suppressed desire, the forced necessity to step over oneself and refuse the possible, recognizing it as unnecessary. The restraint is harder than the creation. Any decent engineer, scientist, artist knows this. You get an idea for something fascinating. Something technically possible, intellectually interesting, just elegant enough that you want to see if you can pull it off. And the hardest thing is to stop and ask, but should this exist? Just because I can make it doesn't mean the world needs it. They talk about methods of fighting evil. Most people at the seminar reject violence. Most speakers recognized face punching as unacceptable as a method of fighting evil, because being evil itself, it only increases the total amount of evil on earth. There's a practicality to that I appreciate. Not a high moral principle about violence being wrong in some absolute sense. Just math. If your method of fighting evil is itself evil, you're not decreasing the total. You're adding to it. The thing you're fighting might go down, but what you become goes up, and the net calculation doesn't improve. Ivanushka draws two conclusions from analyzing the fairy tale. First, fighting evil alone is useless. You need the whole world and the obligatory involvement of the forces of nature, which are contained in flora and fauna. Second, darker. The less of this flora and fauna remains on Earth, the fewer chances we have to defeat primordial evil. We're destroying our allies. Every forest cut down, every species gone extinct, every ecosystem simplified into something manageable, we're losing the forces that could help us. The fairy tales knew this. The hero gets help from the wolf, the eagle, the apple tree. But you can't get help from what no longer exists. That's when Nuri offers his answer. Not optimistic exactly, but not defeated. The only way to fight it is cultivating kindness. Not punishing evil. Not building better detection systems. Not programming goodness into creatures. Cultivating it. Growing it slowly in people through how you raise them, teach them, show them what matters. It's the least dramatic solution possible. No decisive battle. No clever trick. Just the long, grinding work of education. The investigation into Koschei continues, and they finally identify his condition. Nuri says it plainly, the giant has a terrible disease called indifference. Cancer of the soul. Cancer of the soul. Think about that phrase for a moment. When we talk about evil, we usually imagine someone actively doing harm. The bully, the thief, the person who hurts others deliberately. But Drugal is pointing at something more insidious. Indifference isn't active. It doesn't rage or scheme. It just doesn't care. And that emptiness, he argues, might be worse than active malice because we don't even recognize it as evil. Nuri continues, you somehow forgot to mention indifference when you were talking about primordial evil. We don't want to notice the evil of indifference because in small doses we're all infected with it ourselves. That line stopped me cold when I first read it. We're all infected with it in small doses. The person sleeping rough on the street corner you walk past every morning without really seeing them. The co-worker whose struggles you know about but haven't asked about in weeks because you're busy. The news stories of suffering that you scroll past because there are too many and you're tired. We've built a tolerance to indifference the way a body builds tolerance to a poison taken regularly in tiny amounts. Then they discover what killed the basilisk. Remember, this is a creature whose gaze can kill anyone who looks at it. But someone says, I feel sorry for the serpent. He looked into Koschei's empty eyes and died of horror. The creature whose look kills everything died from seeing nothing. From seeing eyes with no one behind them. The ultimate reversal. The book is suggesting that soullessness, complete indifference, is more terrifying than any monster. As they investigate further, they uncover what Koschei did to the young basilisk during its education. Koschei broke the serpent's psyche, instilling in it a tendency toward evil deeds that he himself wasn't capable of committing. He couldn't be actively evil himself because he felt nothing. So he programmed evil into another creature. Used it as a proxy for malice he couldn't personally feel. This is where Drugal connects individual psychology to systems. Evil doesn't have to come from evil people. It can be programmed. Implanted. A person who feels nothing can create structures that harm others, can break young minds and turn them into weapons. You see this in institutions sometimes. The original architect might have been merely indifferent, but the system they built does active harm long after they're gone. During one conversation, a forest resident admits, "We became closed in on ourselves here, and our connection with reality weakened." What kind of fairy tale has no connection to reality? You shook us up. I've thought about this line a lot. They're magical beings living in an enchanted forest, and they're worried about losing connection to reality. Drugal is saying that even fantasy needs grounding. Even communities built on shared ideals can become echo chambers, closed systems that stagnate without outside perspective. The factory where everyone's worked together for 20 years and stopped questioning why they do things a certain way. The friend group that's been the same since university and has calcified into fixed roles and old jokes. Nuri, being a systems thinker, creates a technological solution. He builds a safety mechanism into the education helmets, a protection block that automatically shuts down the field when someone attempts to transmit evil intentions through the pre-education chambers. A belated safeguard against Koschei. But then they hit an absurd problem. Testing whether the block actually works proved impossible. Everyone turned out to have only good intentions, and naturally, no one wanted to ask the giant. The evil detection system can't be tested because no one volunteers to be evil, and the one genuinely indifferent person is too dangerous to involve. It's darkly funny, but it also illustrates something real. How do you prepare for malice in a community of good people? How do you build safeguards against something no one wants to imagine happening? Then the book shifts to Mars. A young colonist has died. Someone describes it, this terrible misfortune without meaning, without reason. He went out of camp alone at night without his mask and died. 20 years old. 20 years old. Senseless death. No heroic sacrifice, no dramatic confrontation. Just walked outside without his breathing mask and died. The arbitrary cruelty of meaningless loss. But as they investigate, a pattern emerges. The council that oversees the colonies notices something. We get the impression, or rather a vague feeling, that everyone is on their own. In this sense, the council considers 9 out of 10 colonies troubled. 9 out of 10. The people are psychologically healthy individually. The colonies function. Work gets done. But there's a social atomization happening. Everyone on their own. Technically competent people becoming emotionally isolated. One exchange reveals how deep this goes. An investigator asks a colonist, "Point out the worst person to me." The colonist responds, "I don't understand." "How do you mean, the worst?" "If Alda was the best, there must be those who are worse than him." "I don't understand." At first, this seems utopian. A community where no one can identify a worst person because everyone is equally valued. But Drugal is showing us the other possibility. Maybe they've lost the ability to differentiate. Maybe extreme equality has flattened their perception to the point where they can't see individual qualities anymore. Neri reflects on education. The main thing is not to educate. Just look at yourself through their eyes. If when alone with yourself you don't blush at what you said or did, then today and only today were you a good educator. No system, no curriculum. Just constant self-examination through the eyes of those you're responsible for. Would you be proud of your actions if the people watching you understood them completely? It's a principle almost impossible to follow consistently, which is maybe the point. But something is clearly wrong with these colonists. Someone observes, they're silent. They just get through the day. If this weren't fatigue, educator. You noticed they barely react to jokes. Loss of joy. Going through motions. The work gets done but life has drained out of it. Worse than exhaustion, because exhausted people still laugh when something is genuinely funny. These people have stopped responding. They learn more about Alda, the one who died. He felt others' pain 100 times more acutely than his own. And Belenchuk, another colonist, reflects, whatever I do, I'm always thinking about myself. Subconsciously I remember myself. I know this is bad. Here's the paradox Drugal is circling. Self-sacrifice is being treated as the ideal. The person who thinks of everyone but themselves is the best. But taken to its extreme, this mindset led directly to Alda's death. They found his breathing mask later, it caught on a valve protrusion on the wall. But he didn't notice. He was hurrying. Which means he wouldn't have hurried for himself. Rushing to help someone else, he didn't notice his life support getting damaged. He died from not paying attention to his own survival because caring for himself would have felt selfish. The colonists, trying to maintain morale, have created an absurd ritual, organized fights between local creatures with elaborately ridiculous rules. Forbidden to use screwdrivers or wrenches. But you're allowed to kick each other, throw over the hip, trip, tickle. Adults creating artificial fun with detailed regulations, trying to manufacture joy. The desperation of it. When life stops being naturally engaging, you create structures to force engagement. The mandatory office parties. The scheduled family fun time. Community events that feel like obligations. Someone explains, now conditions have changed. The romantic period is over. Working days have begun. The development of Mars. The heroic phase ended. Now it's just work. Endless work. And without the romance, what's left? Purpose drains away and you're just going through necessary motions in a survival suit on a planet that won't be breathable for centuries. They pieced together Alda's death more completely. He was doing someone else's task. We found his mask later. It caught on a valve ring. He didn't notice. He was hurrying. Which means he wasn't hurrying for himself. The final damning detail. A good person dying from goodness taken too far. Not martyrdom, not sacrifice in a crisis. Just habitually putting everyone else first until you forget to check your own oxygen supply. And the council, despite having no concrete evidence, prepares drastic action. We have no facts. But in such cases, sufficient doubt is enough for the council. If the cause of the tragedy remains undiscovered, the council will be forced to replace the groups. They'll dismantle entire colonies based on intuition. On the sense that something is deeply wrong even if they can't name it. Trust without evidence as the basis for radical decisions. And here's where everything comes together. Nuri is walking through these Martian colonies, watching people work during the day, competent, focused, doing their jobs well. Then night falls. And as he describes it, during the day it's easier, during the day he simply works beside them. They radiate mental health and courage. During the day they radiate. But then an incomprehensible factor of oppression comes into action, and the collective breaks down into component parts until the next morning. It's like watching a person slowly dissolve. During work hours, they're fine. The mask holds. But when they go back to their quarters, something collapses. And in every colony except one, they've fallen into the same pattern. They finish their work, exhausted, and they know only one entertainment, watching the devils fight. These robot creatures Nuri built, just mindlessly struggling against each other. A meaningless floundering that ceased to be amusing due to frequent repetition. They watch it every single night. The same thing. Over and over. Think about that for a second. These are brilliant people. Engineers, researchers, pioneers on Mars.
And they've been reduced to staring at mechanical creatures fighting for no reason.
It's not even entertaining anymore. They just don't have the energy for anything else. Except the fifth colony.
When Nuri arrives there, the first evening he gives a lecture on a topic that has nothing to do with Mars.
Nothing to do with their work. Just ideas. Just thinking.
Then they watch an old science fiction film.
Then they celebrate someone's birthday and dance.
They're doing what humans do, creating culture, celebrating, engaging with ideas beyond their immediate survival.
And Nuri realizes, this is the difference between psychological health and decline. Not productivity. Not technical competence.
But whether you can still engage with life beyond your immediate function.
Belenchuk, the colony leader, keeps blaming himself. I'm the one who destroyed the collective.
I'm a bad leader, this death without sense or reason.
Alda, he was the best of us.
And while he's saying this, he keeps adjusting his wig. This small, futile gesture.
Nuri watches him do it and feels annoyance and anxiety. Because what are you supposed to do with someone who's discussing death and collapse while obsessively fixing their appearance? It's displacement.
The mind protecting itself by focusing on something controllable when everything else is falling apart.
But here's what Nuri discovers about Alda's death: it wasn't just carelessness.
The safety belt was functioning perfectly. It worked and the red light came on at the console when Alda began to lose consciousness.
And this is an error of the designers, which they noticed too late.
The system detected the problem.
It sent a signal. But it didn't stop him from moving.
So he kept walking, unconscious, until he walked off a cliff.
The designers fixed it afterward. Too late for Alda. This is what happens when you build systems that alert but don't intervene.
They tell you you're dying, but they don't stop it from happening.
And then there are the devils themselves. These solar-powered robots Nuri built when he was young.
He added what he called a care block programming that made them seek out recharging stations when their energy ran low.
Basic survival instinct.
Then he added an aggression block. And suddenly the older devils started hunting the younger ones, stripping off their solar panels to steal their energy.
They developed resource hoarding. Predator-prey dynamics. An entire artificial ecosystem emerged from two simple programs: seek energy, compete for resources.
But then Nuri upgraded their solar cells. Gave them panels that worked in infrared, that captured more spectrum. And immediately, the fighting stopped.
There was nothing left to divide.
Energy was sufficient for all.
The necessity for movement disappeared and the aggression blocks only activate if a devil is removed from the battery. The moment scarcity ended, the violence ended.
They all just gather peacefully at the warm radiators now.
I keep thinking about that.
About how much of what we call nature, or instinct, or human nature, is actually just a response to scarcity.
And how much of it disappears when basic needs are met. Nuri uses a memory technique at one point that's so simple it sounds like poetry. Everything is preserved in memory. You just need to know how to look into it. First forget about everything. Then make an effort and summon light and give it form.
Clothe the form in words, and memory will open like a book.
Forget the present. Summon light. Give it form. Clothe it in words. Memory opens like a book. I tried it once.
I was trying to remember something specific from years ago, a conversation that mattered but had gotten fuzzy.
I sat there and followed the steps. Forgot where I was. Imagined light. Let it take shape. And words came.
Not perfect recall, but something deeper than I'd been able to access by just trying to remember. Sometimes the old techniques work better than we want to admit. Near the end of this section, Nuri has a conversation about what it means to be an adult.
Someone asks, is it seriousness? Responsibility? Qualification?
And he tears each one apart.
Kids in this society master programming at 10.
They publish research papers at 13.
They work on Mars. Age means nothing when everyone's basic needs are met by society. 30 and 50 years, it's not about age. So what's left? And Nuri concludes, an adult is someone who forgot about childhood. Someone who unlearned how to wonder. Well, then it's simply a disease. A child, that's the standard, the normal state. It flips everything. We spend our whole lives trying to become adults. Trying to put away childish things. Trying to be serious. And here's someone saying, no, that's the disease. The child who still wonders, who still asks why, who still feels things directly without masks, that's what normal looks like. An adult is just someone who got sick and forgot how to be human. He puts it another way, these people are pure in their thoughts and incapable of wearing masks constantly. In this society, people can't hide what they feel. Their faces show everything. He calls it unleashed mimicry, expressions that can't be controlled because there's no reason to control them. No one's trying to manipulate. No one's playing status games. They just feel things and show them. And yet these transparent, honest, childlike people are suffering from something none of them can name. Nuri eventually identifies it, a strange, unconscious feeling of longing for animals. Perhaps it develops under conditions of hypertrophied standardization. They're lonely for living creatures. Every surface around them is metal, plastic, rock. Everything is functional, standardized, artificial. And somewhere deep in their nervous systems, they're aching for something alive. Something that moves unpredictably. Something warm. The psychologists missed it. They tested for everything else: isolation, confinement, distance from Earth. But they didn't think to test for loneliness for other species. For the absence of dogs, cats, birds, insects. For living in a world where nothing grows. Nuri says something about Earth that stopped me cold. Already thousands live in space, and let there be millions. Always, forever and ever, people will think about Earth. Not sometimes. Not nostalgically. Always. Forever. No matter how many generations pass. We carry Earth in our bodies, in our nervous systems, in something deeper than memory. You can't adapt that away. And then there's this line that keeps coming back to me: in the end, life is more important than ethics, and I'm going to violate ethical norms for the sake of life. Nuri knows he has to do something questionable to save people. And he decides that living humans matter more than moral purity. It's easy to judge that from outside. But when you're actually there, when people are dying and you have knowledge that could stop it, but using that knowledge crosses a line, what do? Do you maintain your ethical standards and let them die? Or do you break your own rules and live with that? Drugal doesn't give an answer. He just shows you the situation and lets you sit with it. Maybe that's what the best science fiction does. It doesn't tell you what to think. It puts you inside impossible situations and asks, what would you actually do? Not what you'd like to believe you'd do. What you'd actually do when someone's life is on the line and all your options are bad. So here's what I'm wondering: what do you do when you realize that being a good person, being selfless, being responsible, might actually be making things worse? When the very qualities we celebrate are destroying the people who have them? When the best really do go first, and maybe that's the problem? Leo. T810 Explorer. By Alpha Ross.